Good afternoon, everyone. Record floods, Northern Africa, Morocco, Algeria. We got red typhoons spinning into Shanghai. We just flipped from El Nino, La Nina coming on cold and strong in the Pacific. Do you think that's the reason for the deluge across Europe? Or could it be from the Hunga Tonga eruption and the extra water vapor in the atmosphere? We'll take a look at it. In the vortices, the jet streams being bent, Arctic cold invading Central Europe and also touching Northern Africa. Some people say it could be the planetary geometry lining up not seen since 79 AD, but hey, it's only a cycle. Could it have anything to do with the immense amount of rain coming out of the atmosphere in conjunction with the Hunga Tonga eruption? Looking at La Nina and El Nino, 1988, 1997, these are the largest events so far. And here we go, sea surface temperature anomaly, Nino 3.4 coming on strong and very cold. That's a huge plunge coming off of what it was even last month. Effect on wintertime in America, Pacific Northwest, get out the snow shovels. Looking at the precipitation totals over Africa and the Sahel, far above normal is what you're looking at on the chart here. And if there were an enormous amount of extra rainfall and we had that strange jet stream set up, well, hot air combining with cold, moisture-laden air may lead to floods, do you think? Here we go. Algeria. Not normally like this, but again, our infrastructure can't hold in the new rainfall patterns that are emerging across the planet. Now this is a roadbed here that is being traversed that has turned into a lake, if you can believe that. They're just following the pylons there to not to slip off the road, hopefully. And just taking a gaze at the overflooded river that is normally a stream in once in a 1,000-year flood flow. Algeria floods submerge the livestock market at Ain Guzam. So everybody look, this is an all-encompassing event here. There's a massive amount of water coming down. And off of MSN News feed, the flood submerge. And that seemed to be a big story of coming into the camel market and floods. Now this is in Betchar, Algeria also. Tiny little stream somewhere in there, but it's flooding all the way over to the other side of those walls. Ferocious water, to say the least. People were captivated by this. A lot of larger video, and this is kind of don't try to cross that with the motorbike, all I'm going to say, for those with common sense. A lot of people do though. And if we come up to Ouarzazate in Morocco, you can't tell me looking out your window that this is normal. It turns out the key to losing weight and keeping it off is not carbs or fat or even probiotic rich foods. Nope. The end game of having a healthy weight, as well as more energy and a long, healthy life, comes down to a specific switch which you can flip in your body to flush out unnecessary calories. Dr. Stephen Gundry is calling this caloric bypass. And by activating this specific process in your body, he's seen thousands, yes, thousands of people dramatically improve their health, even at age 50 and beyond. This includes losing weight, getting tons more energy, and returning to the good health that they had in their youth once they simply addressed this one key to better health. Dr. Stephen Gundry has lost 70 pounds himself using this research and has kept the weight off for over 20 years and counting. His digestive issues are gone, his health is fantastic, and he feels younger and healthier today than he did in his 40s. His video has been watched by over 20 million people to date, and you can watch and learn more about it at thehealthyfat.com/adapt. And he'll teach you exactly how he's kept his weight off for free at thehealthyfat.com/adapt. Click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video. These floods, for some reason, wherever they touch, seem to drop an enormous amount of rain. But, you know, that Hunga Tonga eruption pushed up 14% more moisture into Earth's atmosphere in a single event. It is now coming out in earnest. So everywhere we go, You're looking at a minimum 10% larger than the largest floods ever recorded, at least in the modern era, because that much extra water is coming out. And I'm wondering what kind of debris is going to get tangled inside those date trees there. So when the water subsides, what will that have grabbed in the flow? And then if it comes straight into the Moroccan desert, this is what is occurring also. These streams are starting to erode into, sand. And we start to see that erosion pattern as once very small creeks turn into raging rivers. And you can imagine how much land scarring is happening with this. Now jumping over to Pakistan for a second here. These flash floods up in Gilgit. This is kind of a edge of going up into the very high mountains to the edge of the Himalaya. And I thought about going up to Gilgit way back in the 90s and doing some trekking. But I ended up in Himachal Pradesh. Now speaking of taking different tracks, the path of Cyclone Yagi, and you can see how it came over Hainan Island, right over into Vietnam, and as it became a tropical depression, right up into Laos and northern Thailand up there. And as I say, our infrastructure can barely hold on anymore with these massive amounts of floods coming through. Our modern infrastructure can't hold it together, and all we're seeing is collapse after collapse, destruction event after destruction event. Very hard to put 10% more moisture on a water flow with the extra velocity and say that our engineering specs are going to hold. And this bridge collapsed here in Phu province. That's going to be a costly repair, and how are they going to get across the river? The damage to the economy too when you're looking at this kind of upset in the way that people move goods from point A to point B. And taking a look at the shelf cloud that preceded the typhoon, yeah, you see that coming, that it is time to go indoor, that is nature giving you a warning that something is about to flip. Now speaking of that, this was the warning that nature gave to Shanghai before Typhoon Bebinsa came rolling in there as well. Nature's giving us some clear signs in the skies and the heavens that things are not as they seem. Now this is one of my most interesting ones here. I was over on Weibo, and after these floods that are coming, this is not from the typhoon, this is just a couple weeks ago, that massive floods coming through central area, but people are now catching all these fish that had come out. So, some floods wipe away bridges, or they bring foodstuffs to others as well. These giant carp, catfish, different types of freshwater river fish. The floods were so gigantic that these fish were found, a mile inland away from the riverbanks. And people were like, well, there's fish. I'm just going to pick it up. They're still alive. Going to eat them. Nice. Nature does provide in some ways. But again, we see more bridge collapses here, and it just seems to be the theme of the day. Infrastructure's not able to withstand the new ferocity of nature. And since we're in China, I don't need a Doberman Pinscher. I want one of those dragons as my pet. How to keep it from nipping on your heels, though, is the question. And as we continue with Typhoon Yagi, as it became a tropical depression, it swung over northern Thailand. This is Chiang Rai. And for those of you ever on a visa run up there will know where this place is. Heading on your way to Mae Sai. Apparently this is one of the largest floods they've experienced in some multi-dozens of years. You got to go way back into the 1980s to find something when flood control wasn't as developed as it is now. But here is Mae Sai, the border crossing, and images speak for themselves. And anything in their shopkeepers that weren't able to get all their goods out of, lost an enormous amount of, their investments, and what kind of property damage is going on there. You're almost nearly up to the end of the first floors. That looks a good 7 foot deep. And that is not on the river. That is in the middle of a street. So again, our streets become the rivers when there's nowhere else for the water to go. Nighttime shot, and then, it looks like it even increased in height there because you're at the edge of the roof. So I would say that's a good 9 foot in depth there, something. And these extremes are becoming, extreme. And then talking about the temperature anomaly along with that very unusual jet stream, Not only this event, but a few weeks ago, these were the floods in Spain. It's just happening everywhere. There's no place that's immune from this. So, it's not normal to see furniture sweeping down through small village streets, which again, that's the main number one thing that keeps repeating is the streets become the rivers when there's nowhere else for that water to go when it comes outside of its banks. And, imagine the amount of property damage here and the insurers that are going to have to try to cover this. They're not. It's getting to the point where insurance companies are getting so inundated now that they can't cover insurance any longer, the cost to rebuild. So where does that leave you and me? Well, if your car is damaged in this flood, this is France, by the way, then you're not going to maybe possibly get insurance for either your property, for your vehicles. And that means you can't own it, because if you can't insure it in this day that we live in the world today, you cannot own it. You have to have insurance. And at what point do insurers say, no more, it costs too much? And I'm just wondering how intertwined this change that has been told that we are changing, and it's being a forced change, is related to all of what we would see with this uptick in extremes. Did somebody know something before this, and they knew this world wouldn't last, this current iteration of our civilization / world would not survive through the extremes built on previous, what was the highest or the most ferocious? As you see, everything's crumbling at the moment. So the insurability is going to be a question moving forward. And we still have a couple more years of that water to come out of the atmosphere from the Hunga Tonga eruption. All at the same time, we're into this economic kind of reshifting of monies, assets, value, commodities across the planet into an entirely new trade system with the BRICS. You tell me, do you think they're related? Because governments seem to be responding exactly in tandem to the planetary alignments coming up here in October, the ferocious wipeout of homes, roads, buildings, countries that are paralyzing it. So, just do an honest assessment of it. Everything is stacking up and running parallel. So who knew what, and why was this time of change built into our world? I'd like to hear what you think. Are they related, and how are they intertwined? See you next time. Bye for now.